Hi, welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast, where we delve into the stories behind the stories. We're asking authors questions, some of them fun, some of them serious, and from their answers, you're going to learn things you never knew about the people who write the stories you love. My name is Patricia McLinn. I'm your host and designated question asker.
I am Rachel Grant, and I'm an author who loves readers.
Now, let's start the show. Hi, and welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast. I am really excited to have Rachel Grant with us this week. Rachel and I think we knew each other some online, but not a whole lot. And then we hung out together at Writers Police Academy. And you got to understand, Writers Police Academy is someplace where you come back from and you're all excited because you got to spin a car and get handcuffed. So Rachel understands that same feeling. Not everybody else does. So we were simpatico. So Rachel, tell us a little bit. Clearly you write things where it's important to know how to spin a car and be what it feels like to be handcuffed. But tell us a little bit about what you write.
I primarily write romantic thrillers, and my last few books have had a strong military connection. I mean, they're romantic military thrillers set in Africa, based around a military base there. But I'm an archaeologist, and my husband is an archaeologist. And so my stories actually really explore I frame them as there where archaeology, politics, and war collide. Because, and in fact, my husband he's an archaeologist for the military. So I actually know a lot about how archaeology and war can collide.
Fascinating. I didn't know the military had archaeologists.
Exactly. Not a lot of people realize that, but yeah, they're pretty active too.
So what are they doing? Are they making sure that the military isn't destroying archaeological sites, or are they,
Yes.
what do they do? Oh,
Yes.
that's it?
So the U.S. military has to follow basically environmental law here at home and at their bases abroad, and historic preservation laws fall under that umbrella of environmental laws. And so, mostly my husband works here in the Pacific Northwest. We're in Washington State. He works on a Navy base here, but he also does travel occasionally. He went to Djibouti on the Horn of Africa a few years ago, which inspired my Africa Set series. And actually, just on Monday of this week, he got back from Palau. He spent almost 3 weeks in Palau, in Micronesia, which was his second trip to Palau. The first time he was there was in 1997. He was there for 4 months as we were engaged, and he was working on a private contract. He wasn't working for the military then. So it was really fun for him to get to go back 21 years later.
What is the coolest thing he's ever found that's not classified?
Well, I have to say that the Djibouti project was pretty amazing because as an archaeologist, I mean, we've worked all over the Pacific Northwest. Oh, and I also haven't mentioned, he's also an underwater archaeologist. So he's like the coolest kind of archaeologist.
Oh, wow.
and so he's worked on shipwrecks and things like that. But in the range of projects that we work here in the U.S., and even he's worked in Japan, and he's worked in Korea and American Samoa. So he's done some good traveling. I haven't. He's done all the traveling. We find a lot of prehistoric Native American tools and things that are pretty cool. But it's not like when he was in Africa. He was finding tools that were made like 1 million years ago by hominids, which is mind-blowing to me. That's, he was allowed to bring back a tool that as a teaching collection, and he's actually done a lot of talks where he's been able to bring this tool, and I've actually brought it to conferences to show it to people. In fact, I meant to bring it to Writers Police Academy, and I totally forgot. to when he brought the tool home and he put it in my hand, and I was holding in my hand an object that was made 1,000,000 years ago by a
Oh.
creature that wasn't yet human is astonishing, and that they used this to survive. It was a tool, just to me. So yeah, that's the coolest thing ever.
Now, I was focusing on him, but you are actively you're not a full-time writer?
I am a full-time writer. I haven't worked in the field since my daughter was a toddler. Yeah,
Okay.
I was able to. We late 2001, we moved to Hawaii for my husband's job because he was working for the Army Corps of Engineers at that time, and we sort of did the math, and it was like I can quit and stay home and raise our child, and and I told him then, I said, and I'm going to write a book. So that
Ah.
was when I started writing. So yeah, I've been very lucky that I don't have to work anymore in the field. I'm happy about that.
Did you get to go to Africa with him?
No, I just got
Uh,
to hear about it and see lots of photos.
and what a great resource. And a resource, a lot of us were researching and we call somebody and you think, oh, do I want to bother them again with this small question? All you have to do is turn around and
Yeah,
say,
pretty much. Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah. It was really a no-brainer for me to write a book set in Djibouti. I was like, yeah, I think that's going to happen.
That's wonderful. And what has the reaction been to the books with the more military aspect to it?
It's been great. It's been great. They
Terrific.
so far two are out. They came out last year, and I'm polishing the third in that series
And
as
what's
we
the name of the series?
It's the Flashpoint series, and the first book is Tinderbox, which
Mm,
came out in February of last year, and then this past November, Catalyst came out, and then the next one is Firestorm.
that's wonderful. Now,
Thank
one of
you.
my questions often is, what strange jobs have you held or surprising jobs? I don't know if we're going to get more than that. But do you have any others?
Well, I was a telemarketer in college for Sears. I sold maintenance agreements, so this would have been in like 1989. It wasn't necessarily a strange job so much as a miserable job,
Oh,
but
oh.
it was short, so it was good. I got a job waiting tables right after that, and I was very happy.
So, how did people treat you on there? Or did you learn anything about people with that
Well,
job?
actually, the one good thing about being a telemarketer for Sears is selling maintenance agreements is that the people you're calling have already bought the product from Sears, so you're just selling them an add-on.
Mm,
So basically, like the thing that we knew was if you were selling a maintenance agreement on a lawnmower, the customer was going to benefit because lawnmowers always break and always need service, but other products not so much. So it was really like yeah. But they already had the product. So I wasn't trying to sell them a vacuum. I was trying to sell them a maintenance agreement on a vacuum.
yeah, yeah. So it's a little easier.
Yeah.
But I got to say, speaking of lawnmowers, I once did the math on how much it costs to have an annual fix up maintenance work on a lawnmower.
Hmm.
And I decided it was less expensive to just run the thing into the ground and buy a new one,
There you go.
according to my math. Other people may not agree. Okay, let's ask you some more questions to let the listeners get to know you. I'm going to start with a book one. Most writers have a bad habit word. Some of us have more. You have to have at least one, or this is going to be a really short
Oh,
podcast.
well, it's cursing. A particular word in
Oh,
general, which I won't say. Um,
thank you.
but yeah, my readers curse, or my readers don't curse at all, as far as I know. My
They
characters,
might.
they might. My characters curse a lot, especially in the first draft. In the first draft, I really sort of just don't worry about it. And then the second draft, I try to tone it down, find other ways to say it, but I still tend to keep a lot in because, well, one, cursing is actually it's
Military.
military, and cursing is actually sort of a known stress reliever. It is how people express themselves. So yeah, it's my characters curse more than I do, but But as my kids have gotten older, I curse a lot more than I used to too.
For the listeners, it's so interesting because you look so sweet. You do. You look absolutely sweet. And so it has more impact in some ways, I think. Wow. That's on another podcast I talked with somebody about. I had read this article that there are 3 kinds of cursing. There is religious, sexual, and scatological.
Hmm.
And that most people usually focus on one of the 3,
Mm.
and that people tend to have they are offended at different levels by the
Oh,
3.
interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I realized that the sexual tends to bother me
Mm.
more because it is directed
Yeah.
and at the other person.
So, and that's interesting because when I do use it in a sexual context, it's not an insult. It's
Mm.
always like, and yeah, it's not. I would never ever use it as an insult in a sexual, if that makes sense. Because yeah, that would bother
Yes,
me
and
too, especially if my hero's saying, yeah, ooh, no.
let's get more cheerful. What's your favorite color? And do you have a reason why?
My favorite color is more of a rainbow of colors. I don't have a specific favorite color now as much as I used to. Now it's more blue, greens, and purples, and it really kind of depends on the mood. I think, just on
Mhm.
what's appealing to me at the time. So yeah, sort of in that hue range.
What did it used to be?
When I was really young, it was blue for a long time, and then I went through a red phase. Then there was an
Ah.
orange phase, but yeah, it's I thought about that, and I was like, do I have a favorite color? No, it really depends on the shade for starters and the mood.
2 nieces, and in their young childhood days, they loved pink and purple, each of them
Hmm.
separately loved pink and purple, which are my least favorite colors, and when I would get them presents in those colors, it's, boy, this is a sign of true love.
Yeah.
So how about a taste? Do you have something that you crave or that just really hits the spot for you?
I gravitate towards salty snacks kind of thing. I mean, I love desserts, but I could have, 3 bites of dessert and I'd be done. Like that's like satisfying enough. But man, you put a bag of natural Cheetos, the natural ones in front of me, and I will inhale half the bag before I've, even come up for air.
The next question for you is a really important one. You're left-handed or right-handed?
I am left-handed.
You are left-handed.
I
Ooh, I think
am.
you're one of the few. So, is your index finger or your ring finger longer?
My ring finger is longer.
Do you know what that means?
Nope.
Me either. I'm gonna find out though, but I think it's interesting. And you're one of the few left-handers we've had so
Oh.
far. Yeah, I've been surprised at how dominant right-handed has been. Has that being left-handed, has that caused you issues during your life or specifically in writing?
Not in writing, but in sports growing up, they never had the left-handed glove for baseball, so I really
Oh.
dislike playing softball and baseball. Just, things like that. There, it just, I was, I remember like, learning to throw a football, and my teachers wouldn't adapt to throw left-handed. Like it was very interesting to see how just they weren't even going to try, so I can actually throw a football with either hand.
Oh, good for you.
Things like that. But yeah, it was mostly there. I had a few experiences in my working life. I'm a mouse person. I can't work on a computer, even a laptop, without a mouse. I don't use the touchpad, and I mouse all the time. So, so actually looking for a good portable laptop tray that has a mouse pad tray on the left
Oh.
side was very hard to find, but I have a great one. And so I should actually, I've tweeted about it because I finally found one. I mean, I've been looking for years, literally, because I wanted a tray that would actually, fit in a laptop bag. I wanted one that I could carry
Yeah.
with me. And so I finally found a great one that's both left and right-handed. So that was actually pretty big. And then anyways, I was going to say that in my work experience, there were times back when I was working as an archaeologist, and I was in the lab and in the office a lot. And whenever I'd have an issue, I had one coworker in particular who would get very irritated when she was trying to show me something on my computer and my mouse was on the wrong side for her.
On your computer.
And on my computer. And then she would gripe at me and she'd say, "You're not very ambidextrous, are you?" And I just looked at her, I was like, I'm probably more ambidextrous than you are. You just expect me to be. And so it's things like that. There's,
Well, my advice on the tray is to buy several now.
I
and
did.
Stockpile them. Oh, you did, smart girl. Because sure shoot, and they will go out of business and they won't exist anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any strong fears other than unkind co-workers who gripe at you unwarrantedly?
Mountain pass roads that are very narrow with no guardrail. Those can be really terrifying.
That's very specific.
It's very specific, yes.
I've been on some of those roads, and my preference is that I want to be the driver. And I've gone on trips with various people, like through the Rockies and stuff. And they say, "Oh, you want to be the driver because you're in charge?" And I said, "No, because I'm farther away from the edge."
Exactly.
Yes, I do want to be in charge too. But
yeah.
Did you have a childhood book that you can trace back to and go, "Oh, that's when stories got me. That was the one"?
I was 11 or 12 years old when I read Whispers by Dean Koontz. And I didn't like children's books much. I mean, I read a few here and there, but so there I was, and I think I was in sixth grade at the end of sixth grade. So I was pretty young. But I remember I read Whispers and it basically blew me away. And that was, and then right after that, I read a book by Mary Higgins Clark. And so I was hooked. That was it.
You got right into those scary things.
I did. I read a lot. I don't read, like I read from Dean Koontz, and then I read Peter Straub and John Saul. I was definitely more into horror than I didn't read much Stephen King. I read a few of his books, but for some reason his never had grabbed me as much as Dean Koontz.
I always admired. I do not particularly like horror or scary things, and but I admire Dean Koontz's writing and Peter Straub. So I have family members who love those kind of books, and I'd always say, I won't read them, but I'll get them for you.
Well, and I haven't read a Koontz book in decades, and I haven't read a Straub book in decades either. Now that I think about it, and it's just because my taste in fiction has changed. But at the time, it was exactly what I wanted.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Now, I have this odd little desert island that you can't get off of. But you can play movies. Unfortunately, you can only have 3 movies forevermore, and yet it plays these movies. So which 3 movies? Because now I'm curious if you're going to get scary ones or not.
I thought a lot about this one. It was just hard. So I'm going to go with Star Wars because it fulfilled a deep-seated childhood need. Like Star Wars shaped my childhood. So the first one, the first released movie. And then my second movie is one that I should say this one is the one that has fulfilled a deep-seated childhood need, which is Wonder Woman. I mean, I
Oh,
loved Wonder Woman as a child, and if I'd had a movie like that when I would have. And I see my daughter's reaction to watching Wonder Woman, and yeah. So that would be those are the first two, and then it was much harder to choose a third. Basically, I was trying to decide between any of the Captain America movies or The Mummy, the one with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. So I guess The Mummy
wow.
would kind of be a horror movie, kind of.
Well,
But
but
it's,
I see a
I
lot of
want it for the
action
romance.
adventure in
Yeah,
there.
exactly. The romance,
Yeah.
the action adventure, the archaeology, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Those make total sense. And and I can see the three of them together.
Yeah.
So you backed off. You initially said that Star Wars met a deep-seated need.
Yeah. It shaped my childhood.
In
And
what
then
way?
I saw a princess who was powerful and um just I wish there were more women characters, but it was
Mm.
great that there was one and that she was strong and she was integral to the story. And so, I played Star. I was, I think I was 6. I was 6 or 7 when Star Wars released. And so, yeah, that was always who I wanted to be when we were playing any pretend game. And I loved playing make believe when I was a kid. I mean, I guess I was a storyteller then, and I always wanted to my make believe games as a child always involved falling in love. So I guess I was a romantic even then.
And did you play those games with other kids
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
neighborhood?
But we
Okay.
would spend
Okay.
all of our time planning the story and then never actually play. Okay, and so then this is gonna happen. That kind of planning.
We had plastic horses or wild animals, and
Mhm.
we would do stories with those, and we had these big sagas. Not so much. We did dolls a little bit, but more with we played plastic animals. And the other thing we would do is we had a clubhouse called Fort Pioneer in my backyard. Actually, long story. My mother, after Fort Pioneer was built, my mother said, I will never again doubt that you will accomplish whatever you put your mind to. Because she said, yes, we could have it in their yard, thinking it would never happen. So she suffered. And we used to have plays. And what we would do is we would invite the parents to come. And once the parents were seated for the play, then we would all run home and take cookies from our homes and come back and sell them to them. I thought I should have gone into business.
Yeah. That's great.
Do you have any quotes, motivational or upbeat, that you really love and live by? I'm wondering if you've got another life shaper here.
Well, um, this one's sort of a joke, but I kind of sort of mean it. It's "Never Give Up, Never Surrender" from Galaxy Quest.
I love that movie. I just saw it the other day, and it makes me laugh every time.
I
I think it's
it's a
wonderful.
perfect movie. It
Yeah,
fulfills everything it promises to
yeah,
be, and then does it even a little better than you expected.
yeah.
I love that.
I love the guy who knows that he's the no last
Guy,
name because
yeah,
he's gonna die.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's my favorite part
And then
too.
at one point, Sigourney Weaver says, "Have you ever thought maybe you were the plucky comic relief?" And he's like, "Oh, okay."
And he just won an
Yeah.
Oscar. I love it that he just won an
Yes.
Oscar
Yes.
because he was so
Yeah.
great in that.
That's Sam Rockwell?
I think so.
No?
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
never
I think
remember his
so
name
too.
because he's
Yeah,
that character actor, you
because
know.
he's Guy.
Yeah, exactly. He's Guy.
Well, as long as we're talking about movies and quotes and how about a song? Do you have a song that you think
Mm.
helps that reveals your inner soul to the listeners?
Well,
No pressure.
again, that's a hard one. I tend to glom onto songs, more in particular, like when I'm writing, like if I'm looking for a song that kind of fits the story or that I want to mention in the story. Of course, I can't use lyrics, but just to bring something to mind. And of course, so I just finished and I'm currently polishing a book that is set in Tanzania and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And so the song
Wow.
that came to mind immediately as I was drafting was Africa by Toto. So I've been listening to
Ah.
that a lot lately.
Yeah, and so most readers and listeners probably understand, but in case there are any who don't, if an author quotes a song, we have to pay the songwriter or whoever holds the rights to the song lots of money.
Yeah, yeah.
We have to get their permission, and that permission is usually only granted for a lot more money than we can afford.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
Once in a while, somebody gets um, a really wonderful, understanding musician or rights holder, because it's not always the musician, unfortunately, who holds the rights, but very seldom. So a lot of times we use the title because you use the title and everybody starts singing the story in their
Yeah,
head.
exactly. They can feel it, especially if it's a song like, say, Africa, that most
Mm,
people are aware of.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And now you play that while you're writing.
Certain scenes where
Mm.
it was a it was a little it can get a little ridiculous because there was one section in the book where I that was basically the beat and the emotion of the song was sort of how I wanted the reader to feel that as they were reading the scene, because I have my characters, they're on a barge going down the Congo River. And these barges they're cargo barges, but people can pay for passage, and so they're overloaded. Like they'll have like 200 people on them, and I mean, it's crazy. I looked up so many pictures and was reading so many accounts of people traveling on these barges, and I just and I had that song in my head, so I had it on this repeat loop, and my daughter was, "What? Why do you keep listening to that song?" It's called art, honey. I'm creating.
And I have admitted previously that if I have music on that has lyrics, there's no hope. I start typing the lyrics.
Oh,
I
interesting. Yeah.
no matter what my mind says I should be typing, the lyrics start coming out. So I can only do instrumental
Yes.
when I'm writing.
If I don't know if you've ever tried it. I've recently started doing this. I've started listening to in the movie scores
Yes,
while writing, because again they tell a story themselves, but there's no words, and yeah, they can
right.
help shape your mood as you're writing, which is great.
Yeah, they have the variation of tempo and mood, and but one of the things I have trouble with, I keep trying to find ones that are really good for a kind of mysteries, but I don't want really dour mysteries. I want
Yeah.
kind of happy, happy murdered people. Um, and it that can be very difficult to find. I had sort of a core group of I still listen to CDs, so a core group of CDs that I would listen to for romances, and I'm having a little harder time finding the right mix for the
Mhm.
mysteries, because pieces like something like by Northwest, I
Mhm.
love that music, but the whole movie score isn't quite right. Or Charade, a piece of it,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah.
the whole thing. Laura, that movie, I like it, but again, a piece of it. I don't want to hear,
Yeah, you need a
an hour and a
mixtape.
half of. Yeah, I do, and I
Yeah.
I am not the technical wizard to do that. So someday that'll happen. Okay, I want to get into some questions from readers, and this is a classic one, so I will let the reader ask it in her words, which is, where do your stories come from? I know one author who dreams her stories, and this is an aside from me. I wish.
Yeah.
And continuing from the reader, another has a character suddenly taking up residence in her head. So, how are your beautiful stories born?
Well, uh, my background as an archaeologist and my husband's work is often a starting point. And the things that I will look at as I'm starting a new story, and I actually was doing this just last week because I had a lull as I was waiting for critiques back, and I was like, I need to start plotting the book that I'm going to be working on next. And so I was like, well, what's it going to be about? And I knew it was going to be it's going to be the eighth book in a different ongoing my evidence series. And so the first thing, is like I knew who the hero was going to be because he's been introduced in several books. And so then I just asked myself, okay, what type of archaeology or anthropology have I not written about yet? Because
Mm.
I try to present the profession, basically things that people don't realize that a lot of, there's a lot of misinformation about out there about what archaeologists really do. And so I try to show different aspects of the profession in ways that people don't expect. So that's one place where I start. And then the other is setting. I look at, okay, what place do I want to write about? And often, so for example, the book that I've just written that takes place in Congo, I wasn't sure where in Africa the story was going to be set, but I had some parameters for what I wanted, and I started researching different countries and what their issues were. And then once I decided on Congo, then that opened the floodgates for the plot to follow, because then I started researching the first Congo War, the second Congo War, the Rwandan genocide, and all of these things play a part. My stories, they can have a heavy backdrop, but
Yes.
but I you know I it, but at the same time I'm trying to provide a little context for things that we don't necessarily know about as Americans, and feed that in to the story. So yeah, so it comes from decisions on setting and type of archaeology.
I have multiple follow-up questions from that.
Okay.
One and I'm going to sort of take them backwards. The research is one. Do you find, because those are very difficult topics, do you find that research has an impact on your everyday mood? How do you do research like that without having it, really depress you? And taking the research from a generalized horrific to what you need for specific story and people.
It definitely affects my mood and my take on the world when I read about when I start delving into research. The book that's prior to this Congo set book is actually set in South Sudan. And I knew basically next to nothing about South Sudan when I started. And, the first thing, if you look up South Sudan, the first thing you might see is, well, they're in the middle of a civil war right now. The second thing you'll see is that they gained independence in 2011. They became the world's newest democracy. And then the civil war started in 2013. So they were a democracy for all of 2 years before they fell into this civil war, and then from there, they're facing famine, and it's heartbreaking. And it became important to me to shine a light on that. And that was one thing that I realized as I was trying to write this story, how do I write a sexy story set in South Sudan? I was looking at ways. Well, I can't give South Sudan a happy ending.
Mm.
I
Mhm.
I can't do that, but I can shine a light. I can bring it to people's attention. And there were a few issues that my research that became focal to the storyline, as far as girls in the developing world often drop out of school at the age of 12 or 13 because they get their period and they have no way to manage their period in a
Mm.
sanitary way. And a lot of people, I didn't realize it can often be cited, people think that it's a societal thing. Well, they think that girls don't need an education and that's why they're dropping out. But no, it's actually that they have their period and there's nothing that they can
Mm.
do about it. And it's such a simple thing that can be fixed, and so I, f- that became a part of the story. And in the author's note, I named some charities that you can donate to
Oh,
to
yeah.
for menstrual products for adolescent girls. And it's not just a South Sudan problem. South Sudan has a ton of problems, but it's also in India and sub-Saharan Africa, and there's just so many places in the world where girls are not going or don't have access to an education because because they can't manage their periods. And so I focus on that, like, what can I do? Well, I can give links
Mm.
at the back of the book, you know,
Yeah.
and again, I can shine a light and let people know this is really happening in this place. And and I still try to, I still do have a romance taking place where you see these people who are coming together in the midst of all of this, and as they're in that situation, they're relating to what's going on around them and everything. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
just, like I promise readers, it's not it's not hard to read the book because you're just depressed. Like, there is light and there's joy in the story as well. um
Oh, I'm sure. I was sure there was in
yeah,
your stories,
yeah, but it's a
and that
balance
people, yes,
to find that.
and people, you know, if people didn't fall in love and form committed relationships in extremely challenging circumstances, humanity would have died out,
Exactly. Yes,
a long
exactly.
time ago.
Exactly. And for me, it's also really important when I'm studying a setting, and it's very research intensive. I was going to say I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I listen to really long audiobooks that I about the first and second Congo War, and then I watch a
Mm.
lot of YouTube videos. I watch documentaries, anything I can find, and in that process, even though I'm reading about things that are really terrible and difficult, I'm also falling in love with the setting. I want to ride on a barge on the Congo River so badly.
Mm.
I just think it
Wow.
would be amazing, and there's so much that's amazing about Congo. It's heartbreaking, but it sounds incredible. And as you know, same with South Sudan. I want to visit these places. They have a part of
Well,
my heart.
the other follow-up question I had from what you were talking about earlier, where you were saying you'd introduced this character in a previous book, so you knew who the hero was going to be, or in previous books, plural.
Mhm.
And one of our readers has asked if we miss our characters when we're done with a book. And I'm always curious if that is then what causes I know it causes me to write additional books, and I'm curious about other authors. If that missing those characters, then you think they need their book. They
Yeah.
need a book, and I'm going to find a story for them.
Well, I miss the main characters when I reach the end of writing a book. I have fallen in love with the both of the main characters, and so I do miss them, especially when I those during the publication, phase where you're first releasing the book and it's out there, and I know that other people are going to get to meet them and fall in love with them too, and it's just and yeah, and I really miss them then, but it doesn't necessarily play over into how I use those characters in future books. I will introduce characters that I'm not in love with yet, but that I think I'm going to like a lot in
Oh,
early books, and knowing that I'm going to use them later. But I don't fall in love with them until I'm writing about them, and then I do bring in previous characters because I know that readers want to see that. But I try to limit it to really keeping it to what's necessary for the story, because sometimes some books feel like they get overcrowded with previous heroes and heroines coming on the page, and it's like this isn't their story, and so some books will really need those other characters because they're playing a role, especially in suspense. You can have lots of
mm, mm.
specialized skills coming into play, and so then there'll be like a whole cast who's coming back and playing a role, and then other times they'll just like be appear in a phone call. So
I had a book out last year, 2017, called A Cowboy Wedding.
uh-huh.
And it was the classic bringing everybody came to the wedding.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? I couldn't leave past characters out of the wedding.
you
And
know
I
no.
and I actually warned readers that if you have not been reading this series, you might not want to start with this book.
It's
This is sort of a fun party for the people who love the series.
It's so funny that you say that, because I actually have decided that this next book is going to start with a previous couple's wedding, because I haven't done that. I haven't shown And so then I was like, well, then that'll bring this character. So basically, that was exactly it.
Yeah.
They're all going to be at least in the opening scenes, and then
Yeah.
and then the ones that I don't need will go away.
Well, it was a lot of fun to write the characters. I did realize I may be past the point where I enjoy planning weddings, and I had to plan this whole wedding. And I kept saying, it's simple and really laid back, and yet there were more things to plan for the wedding. But it was a lot of fun to have all the characters show up, and I was having a ball with it. I just thought, the poor reader, if somebody picks that up, it's the very first book. It's going to be like, where you go to a wedding with a bunch of friends, and you're the date of one of them,
Yeah.
and maybe you've only been dating him for a while, and holy moly, who are all these strangers, and they're all having a great time. And okay. So, do you have a lot of story ideas? Do you have a backlog of story ideas, and you know what's going to come next? And
I know what's going to come next in my Flashpoint series. I have basically a trilogy. So that I've just done 3 books, and then the next 3 books are also going to be a trilogy. So I kind of know what's coming up there. For my evidence books, I have a vague idea of who I want to feature and where that's going to go. But as far as books that I've started and then put under the bed or whatever, I actually have one 50-page start to a young adult novel that I wrote several years ago that I then realized that young adult isn't going to be my genre. But everything else that I've ever started writing, I have finished and published.
Wow, that's impressive. So, and you haven't thrown out the young adult yet?
I haven't, but I also don't have it on my radar of something that I plan to pick up.
Okay, here's what occurs to me immediately. You write a character who is a young adult author. And then you give you give those first 50 pages to your
there
readers.
You go.
I like to recycle. I still have a few. I have a box in my closet of things in it, and I haven't figured out how to use them yet. But yet is the operative word. I'm gonna get there. So here's another question. Actually, these are questions from 2 different readers, but I'm going to sort of put them together because they hit, well, for me anyhow, they hit some of the same angst notes. So one reader says, when the cover image doesn't match the character description, and that reader says it's a pet peeve, how does it feel for the author? And the other one is, how much does it bother you to find editing errors after your book is out?
Well, so this is where I can say that I'm quite lucky as a self-published author that there have been times when I haven't been able to find a stock photo of a couple that really fit the characters. So I changed the character description.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I have gone back and changed I mean, it's little things like, well, she was supposed to have really short hair. Well, now she has long hair. It's not going to change anything about the story except for the hair length. So things like that.
You aren't as stubborn as I am.
And then my Flashpoint books don't have people on the cover. So there was a freedom to that. It's like, I can just,
there is.
I have a short-haired heroine there. Really short too. And then the typos is the same kind of thing. It's kind of horrifying when you first catch it, but at least I can fix them. Although I will say, I read a review for Catalyst, and the review was probably like a month after, or it was within a few weeks of release, where it was pointed out that the word chauffeur was spelled wrong in every single instance. And I was like cringing. Apparently there's another word that's spelled almost exactly like chauffeur. And, I missed it. My editor missed it, you name it. So, and I wanted to fix it right away, but something that, again, readers probably don't know is that if you, re-upload a book at Amazon during that first 30 days when their algorithms are going crazy, it pulls it out of the algorithm. And so it can really
I
mess
don't
with
think
your
I knew
sales.
that.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
it
don't
can.
think I knew that. Oh.
I have gotten bitten by that one before by myself, and then another time I was in a box set, and once it's pulled out of the algorithm, it's hard for it to find its traction back in there. And so I don't
Oops.
re-upload a book in that first 30 days. I just don't. And in fact, I try to avoid it the first 90 days just because you're still in that new release period. So I didn't fix it actually until a few weeks ago. And it did bother me.
Yeah, yeah.
It was there, but it was like, well, hopefully not a lot of people know how to spell chauffeur.
Well, that is really interesting because I know I have swapped books out in the
Mm.
first, absolutely, in the first 90, and a couple in the first 30. One for particular reason, it was all my fault. It was hands crossing and the wrong file got in, and
Oh,
I
yikes,
would
yeah.
do it again.
Oh,
I would
yeah,
do it
yeah, yeah,
again,
there are times
and
when you just can't
it
avoid
was
it.
it was still a complete book, but it was not the polished one
Yeah,
that it should have been. So,
yeah.
you know, I will no regrets about that one. A couple other ones I'm thinking, but how can it's done,
Yeah,
gone.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Now, from your beginning and when you're working on the story, do they change a lot from your initial conception to when you actually put the book out there to the world?
They can. In fact, they used to a lot. My writing process has changed in that I'm much better at envisioning in the first draft, where it's going to go. But yeah, it's. I've had books that for a long time I didn't want my agent to put me out on submission on a partial just because it was that feeling of I don't know how it's going to end, and so she would only put me
Yeah.
out on submission for completed books. Now I'm much more confident in my writing and craft, and I know that I'm much closer to knowing where it's going to go, and so I can write synopses for books like that. But a lot of books like this book that I'm the next book I'm about to start, I probably won't write a synopsis before I start writing. I probably won't try to plot it out much. I usually try to look at what the first and the second turning point will be, and then after I've figured out those, I might have a good idea of what the black moment is going to be. I always know the villain. Like I know who the villain is going to be before I start, because if you don't, that can make it really hard.
Well, I often don't, and I'm
Yeah,
writing murder mysteries, and
yeah.
I had the classic case with the murder mystery backstory. I thought I knew who the
Ah,
murderer was, and I'm writing along, and I was actually ahead of time. I was ahead of schedule, and
ah.
I'm writing along, and I'm looking at the screen as I'm writing, and lo and behold, the one I thought was the murderer ended up dead. And I can remember looking at the screen, going, "This is a
This
problem."
is uh-oh.
So yeah. So I had to do some scrambling, but you're more confident
Mhm.
now that you're writing. But do you has your process in other ways changed? Is there not writing a synopsis, of course, is part of the process, but I'm also thinking, are there areas where you feel at the beginning I wasn't so sure about dialogue, and now I love dialogue, or whatever? Are there
Yeah.
things that have changed from when you first started being published?
Well, one thing that I have that has been a huge shift in my process is that I used to write draft after draft after draft, and there's one book in particular where basically I threw away about 90,000 words of a 98,000 word
Wow.
manuscript. I kept the characters and the setting, and a lot of the conflict, but all of the scenes ended up being different. And
Wow.
even the scenes that I kept had the wrong tone, and so they were pretty much rewritten. Um, and multiple times, that was only one book that I've done that with, but multiple times I've written a whole book and then thrown away the last 50,000 words and then redone it. And so basically, once I was published, I can't afford to do that anymore. That's a lot of wasted
Mm.
writing time. And so one thing I have learned to do is uh, to stop when I recognize that I'm starting to write off the rails, like where something just feels off, and maybe the last scene or two isn't really going in the right direction. I mean, I used to be able to write another 25, 30,000 words after that diversion of the story. And now I'm like, nope, not going to do that. And so I'll give myself a day or two to pace around the house and talk to myself and try to figure out exactly where I went off track, and go back to that point, and then start rewriting from there. And so I might dump 5, even 10,000 words, although rarely that much anymore. But I'll dump some of the words I've written, but it's not like dumping half a book, and it's not like wasting a month of writing time writing half of a book versus 3 days of writing time.
So you're recognizing going off the rails much earlier.
I can. Yeah. And actually that I started to recognize that when I was at the point where I was rewriting that book that I had dumped so much, that every time I would get to a point where I was really struggling, I would pull back, because my temptation was to just keep writing. Well, I'll keep writing and I'll figure it out later. That doesn't work.
Do you write in sequence? Do you start at the beginning and work all the way to the end? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do. Very, very rarely will I write out of order. There might be a scene or something that I'll jot notes down because I see it, but even then I'm not writing the scene. I'm just writing the notes.
So I find that I write out of order.
Oh, wow.
And yet when I am finishing a book, and then I'm cutting and adding and cutting and adding and cutting and adding, and I can tell almost maybe 80% of what I cut is what I wrote early in the process. It's always that kind of writing my way into the guts of the story, and it just takes me a while. And then once I really get it, then I'm not cutting that as much anywhere near. I'm still editing it, of course, but that chunks aren't coming out of that. Those are the right chunks. Yeah, it's not very efficient, but it's the way it works. So what for you is the most difficult part of the writing process? And you can also say
whatever part I'm in, right? That no, it's I love revising. I do. I love revising because at that point I already know the characters, etc. So I guess it's really just that first draft. It's figuring out how to make all the threads come together. And I love a complex story, and so there's a lot of pressure I put on myself. I want my first drafts to be perfect, and they never are. And I'm learning to accept my process a lot more, and just know, hey, it's my process and it works. But
that acceptance is big.
Yeah.
Now you're writing guys, of course. Do you have a certain approach to writing characters of the opposite sex?
I don't think I ever really thought about it at first. So I was already writing before it occurred to me that I needed to maybe check in with my husband a little bit, like, would a guy use that word, that kind of thing. But I've recently started writing characters with a different ethnic background from myself, and I think that it's sort of it should be the same approach, which is just that seeking authenticity. I mean, I am not going to that my hero in Catalyst is Native American, and I can't I'm not a Native American man. So but I can do my best to treat him with respect and aim for as much authenticity as I can get. And I did ask a Native American to do a beta read, and she provided some great feedback, and it just and my and in the same token, I guess I could say, well, my husband also always reads my my books before they're published as well, so he does occasionally give me the guy feedback. So
the difficult, I was thinking, is both. Well, I'm arguing with myself in my head, so sorry, that's why I got quiet, because I'm thinking, your husband reads it. He's one guy. That's his experience.
Exactly.
Other people have have different experiences of being a guy. And there's no way on earth any of us can write a character who is going to reflect
Exactly.
everybody's
Exactly.
experience of being a guy.
Yeah.
So, or a Native American, or anything else.
Exactly.
A
And
journalist for me, or
and I certainly wouldn't view the fact that I had a sensitivity read done to be like endorsement or saying, like I'm not going to hold that up as a shield of, yeah, but no, because I still have to own anything that I got wrong, any language that's offensive or whatever, because just because it didn't offend her doesn't mean it's not going to offend somebody
right.
else, and it's on me, yeah.
If we wrote solely not to offend anybody, I don't think we could write the word the.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
maybe not even
Yeah.
it just can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can be an issue too, where as a reader, I catch myself sometimes being aware that my experience of something, other people had different experiences of it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's talking about, going to school at a certain era and time, I'm always taken aback when people, talk about if it was difficult being in high school or whatever. And I think, well, I had a good time,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
that was my experience. So I think we all have to be more, both as writers and readers, be more open to other people's individual experiences. So if the experience is right for that character, maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm getting to.
And there are other things that I took into consideration. Like, so I wrote a Native American character, but the place where he is in the story is South Sudan. So I wasn't trying to write about the Native American experience of living on a reservation here in the
Right.
U.S. because that's not my story to tell. And so that's the other thing I think is just to be aware of when it's I think I want to write more diverse characters. I want to make that much more part of my work, but I also need to be mindful of what is my story to tell and what is not. So
Okay, another writer asks us, and some of this has to do, sort of informs process too, I think. Another writer asks where you write, and if you have, which I find this really kind. They want to know if we have an inspirational view, and then I will talk. I want you to also talk about from the where, talk about your routine and how that fits into your process too.
I write wherever the mojo is in my house. I have an office. I'm actually in my office right now, and there's a moving truck out in front of the neighbor's house. And I was worried that while we were talking, that would be distracting, but they're not actually doing anything, so we're good. It's like often I'll be in my bedroom where I have no. I mean, I have windows, but I don't look out them. When I'm writing on the bed, I'm not looking out the window. Then there's the living room and the family room. They each have a couch, and so really, it truly is just sort of where I am feeling it that day. I don't write in public. I don't go to coffee shops or anything like that. I think that would be way too distracting. I've tried a few times, and when my kids were younger and I had to take them to karate and things, I would actually write then during karate. But now we're past that stage, so I don't have to write in public, and which is much easier for me because I'm so easily distracted. My routine
Me too.
is exactly. My routine is I try not to go online or check email before I've written 1,500 words for the day. Because if I
Oh, you're good.
well, I say try. So sometimes when I have things going on and I know that I might be getting an email I need to respond to, et cetera, then it's much harder. But I have found that when I do that, and this means like actually the night before on my laptop, turning off the Wi-Fi so that my email doesn't even load. Because if it loads and I see that number there that I have new emails that I haven't looked at, I can't focus. I have to, so I'll turn off the Wi-Fi the night before, and then if I write my 1,500 words before going online or dealing with responding to emails or anything, I have found that it is much easier for me to get back to work after that distraction because I'm into the story. I'm already in my characters' heads. But if I
Mm,
check email first, if I go online first, I lose all energy and enthusiasm for working just because just it's, I'm no longer ready to start my day. And so that's I need to do that more. I need to, especially when I with a first draft, that's vital. When I'm revising, I might not necessarily follow that so much simply because I do already love the story. I love revising. Revising is so much
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Okay, I get to ask this because I give people some sample questions and they get to eliminate some. You did not eliminate this one.
Oh.
Most people do. If your writing were a color, what would it be?
um, mm,
And
that's
now you're
funny.
going to say you meant to eliminate it.
No,
You
no,
missed
it was really well. I don't. Um, it varies from book to book. Some books,
Oh,
so that's
like
that's why I didn't eliminate because it was like I could see that. So I actually try to match the color of the cover to it. So like Tinderbox was totally red, orange, fire, and hot. So there's flames on the cover. So yeah. And then other books can kind of feel like a cool blue or an earthy. Uh, Brown or green. If it's an earthy
mm-hmm.
book, I try to have the covers shifted more green, just because they pop. So yeah, that.
That's a great answer. I love that.
Thank you.
So, which of your stories has surprised you the most?
That's a tough one. I don't know.
What about the one where you had to throw so much out? And tell us what that title was.
Oh, that's Incriminating Evidence, and actually, so that one was interesting in that, like I said, so I wrote a whole draft, and I knew it was terrible. I mean, I there were parts that were good, but I knew that it needed a lot of work. So I wrote the whole draft, but I realized that one of the problems with it was that I did not have a feel for the setting, and I love researching setting. And that book was set in Alaska, so I took my family to Alaska for a week. It was great. And I came back from
Oh,
Alaska and it was like, okay, now I can write it.
I've done a number of things for writing. Um, River rafting
Mm,
is one.
yeah.
I've done, well, of course, shooting and stuff at the Writers Police Academy. I'm not sure I can say that spinning a car in the pit maneuver was really for writing. I love that. I love that.
Oh, I was too scared to
It was. It
to
was.
sign up for that one.
Do you get a lot of comments and directly to you and readers emails, and what sort of things do they react to in your stories?
Well, recently I had a reader email me after reading Catalyst, the one that I was talking about, where in the author's note I mention a charity that can be donated to
Mm-hmm.
provide sanitary products to young girls. And she it was the most lovely email because she was like, I love your stories because of this and this and this, but this really touched me. I really appreciated that. She
Oh,
loved that I had put that in the author's note, that that I included an actionable item that could be done after having
yeah.
her mind open to what is the plight of South Sudan. So things like that are pretty amazing. And actually, I've gotten some really great feedback from that book along the lines of the the book having a social conscience about something that we really don't know much about, and yet it also being this exciting thriller that and so I really appreciated that. It was because this was definitely, I've touched on difficult subjects in a lot of my books, but this was the first one where it was it was really highlighting a lot of things that are going on in the world. I mean, I have my heroine, so in the near the beginning of the book, the hero, he's a Green Beret. He's rescuing her from a slave market in which children are being sold,
Mm.
which is going on in that part of the world. And so, yeah, it was it was hard to write, but incredibly proud of it for the scope of what it covers. And I've
You should
thank
be.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's terrific. And when a reader recognizes that and takes the time to let you know, that means so much.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love these questions from the readers. I think they're so interesting. So this reader has asked, if you could write a book with any other author, alive or dead, who would you want to work with and why?
Well, it took me some time to think of what my answer would be for that, and then the moment the name popped into my head, it was like, well, of course, I don't even know why I had to hesitate. It would be Elizabeth Peters, who passed away a few years ago, also known
Oh,
as
yeah,
Barbara Michaels, and it's actually
right.
I blame Elizabeth Peters for the fact that I'm an archaeologist. So it is.
Or credit her.
Yeah,
Credit
exactly.
her.
I read Street of the Five Moons, one of her Vicky Bliss stories, my senior year in high school, and was just hooked. I'm a minority. I'm gonna confess. I'm not as much into the Amelia Peabody stories. I'm sure that they're delightful and lovely, but that just never captured me as much as her Vicky Bliss and and then her and Jacqueline Kirby and those books, and then just a lot of those little one-off
Yeah.
mysteries that were just so fun. And so
Shattered Silk was
oh
the one I
yes,
loved. Do you remember that one?
Shattered Silk. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm looking on my shelf to see if it's there. I remember buying, I think it's that one that I bought at Costco, and I picked it up because I was like, oh my gosh, it's another Barbara Michaels, I believe is the name that one was published under. And it was
Yes.
another one,
Yeah.
and I was at Costco and I looked at the back of the book, and her main character was named Rachel Grant in the back cover copy. And I was so excited.
I
And
don't remember
but
that.
then
That's
when I was
terrific.
reading the book, they I think her last name only shows up like once in the book, and it wasn't Grant. I can't remember what it was. I should dig out my copy, but I remember it
Ah!
was like just a mix up between the back cover copy and the book, probably because she basically never used the last name, and so it didn't really matter.
So we should have asked the question of when the back cover copy does
Yes,
not
there you
accurately
go.
reflect the book.
And you buy it because you're like, this is my idol, and she's written a book about me.
And I'm early, and she lived in the DC area. She lived in Maryland, I think, and I met her a couple times, just very
Oh, I'm
briefly in passing. But what
so
a lovely
envious. I'm so
person.
envious. She would never
Really
want to
lovely.
write with me. My books are racier and my characters curse and all of that, but still, I love her greatly. Admire her so much.
Oh, she had a bit of a wicked
Oh,
twinkle in her eye,
excellent.
so she might. For people who are new to you, haven't read any of your books, do you have one or two that you think are really good introductions to how you write and to the stories that the kind of the feel of the stories that a reader would get from you?
Well, I try to structure my series books so that you can jump in at any point. But I would say that in the evidence series, um, book 5 has a thread that's picked up in book 7, and book 6 has a thread that's picked up in book 7. So like if you were going to just jump in at a random point in the evidence series, you could really pick any book before book 5, but then you might want to start with 5 if that's I mean, the others work, you could read them standalone, but you get a few more spoilers because I try to keep the spoilers out, as much as possible. So I would say that, and book 5 is covert evidence in that series. For the Flashpoint series, I would say Tinderbox, the first book in the series, just because again, they can be read out of order, but there's only 3 books, so you may as well start with the first one.
Well, and they
Yeah,
build.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Firestorm, the one that's going to be coming out next, is very much a direct sequel to Catalyst. So.
Mm. Do you have any books that you think that get overlooked more than your others?
Cold
That,
Evidence.
for whatever
Yeah,
reason?
Cold Evidence is the 6th book in the evidence series, and And I just love that book. It was easy to write. It's set in my home
Yeah.
state. It's got underwater
Which is?
archaeology, which,
What's your home state?
Washington State.
Oh, it is Washington
Yeah.
State. Okay, I knew you lived there now. I
Yeah,
didn't know.
well, I call it my home state. I've actually lived 7 years in California, 7 years in Michigan, 7 years in Florida. So I didn't move here
Wow.
until I was 21, and then since I've lived here most of the time since I was 21, with the exception of 3 years in Hawaii and 2 years in DC. So I've lived here longer than anywhere else. But so it's as home as anything, and it's where
Yeah, I have this theory though that wherever you're sort of formed remains. So I consider myself a Midwesterner,
Mhm.
even though I spent longer in the DC
Mm.
area chronologically than anywhere else. But I'm still a Midwesterner. I will still talk to strangers.
And I used to feel a really strong connection to Michigan because that was, age of 7 to 14. I went, from elementary school to high school there.
Mm.
But as the years go on, it feels so much more distant now.
Okay, is there anything I have not asked you that I should have or that you would like to answer?
Well, the question of before I wanted to be a writer, what did I want to be? And
Okay.
when I was in elementary school, I wanted to be Olivia Newton-John, but that job was taken. I so wanted to be her.
Darn.
Princess Leia and Olivia Newton-John.
Okay. Interesting
um,
combination.
and so then after that, when I did want to be a singer, which and that lasted through high school, and I even took voice lessons. Now I'm not a good singer, so I had to give up that dream. And by my senior year in high school, I knew that I wanted to be a writer. I was doing creative writing. I was the editor of my high school's literary magazine, and I knew that writing was what I wanted to do. But then when I went to college, and I was an English major, declared when I went off to college. But when I went there, I realized this is the hubris of an 18-year-old, where I was like, wait a minute, here I have this opportunity to study anything. I already know how to write. Why would I want to spend money on that? I should learn about something that really interests and excites me so that then I'll have fodder for writing later. And so I was like, I love Elizabeth Peters. I love her books. She writes about, anthropology and archaeology. I think that would be really cool. And then I looked up in the catalog for the coming semester's classes, and Intro to Physical Anthropology was taught by Professor Elizabeth Peters
Oh my
at
gosh,
Florida
meant to
State
be.
University.
Meant to
And so
be.
I was just like, all right, that's it. So there you go.
I love it. I love
That's
it.
why
It clearly was meant to be.
it was.
So tell the listeners where they can find out more about you and your books.
Well, my website is www.rachel-grant.net, and that's Rachel, Rachel. And then I'm at all of the major online retailers, and you can find links on my website for that. And then also 9 of my books are available at Audible, so you can listen
Terrific. And we will have links to Rachel's website and some social media type stuff on the show notes too for folks. And now we get to do my very favorite part, the either or questions. So it was rapid fire. Let's just go. I'm going to say daisies or roses,
Roses.
hot air balloon or train trip.
Oh, train.
Are you afraid of heights?
No, I just love trains. Although now I'm thinking about it, I'm
Okay.
like, oh, hot air balloon would be really cool. No, no, I love trains.
Yeah, and I should not ask you that because the idea is to have you pick one or the other, and here I'm drawing you out to go to the other way. Cat or dog?
Cat.
House decorating or gardening?
House decorating.
Paint or wallpaper?
Paint.
Thank you. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Winter Olympics or Summer Olympics?
Winter, for sure.
Yay. Nail polish or bare nails? No
Uh,
commentary here.
I love nail polish. I never remember to put it on.
Okay, let's do a writing police academy one. Pit maneuver or shooting?
Shooting. That's what I did. I did long gun and short gun.
Oh, well, long gun or short gun?
Oh, I was better with the long gun, but I think everyone is. So, but they were both interesting.
Not me.
Short gun, I'm going to say long gun just because it's less scary. Like you can't turn it on yourself. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. Day or night?
Day.
Opera or show tunes?
Show tunes.
Paper plates or best china?
Best china.
Pickup or sports car?
Pickup.
Hiking boots or cowboy boots?
Hiking.
Spring or fall?
Fall.
Ice cream or
My birthday's
cake?
in the fall. Ice cream.
And the last one, grab the best first or save the best for last?
Save the best for last.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate your being on the podcast and getting to spend this time with you, more time. And neither one of us had a weapon. We still had fun. How do you like that?
Thank
and
you.
I hope, it was a lot of fun. I hope the listeners will come back next week to meet another author and get to know them a little better and the stories behind the stories. In the meantime, have a great week of reading. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining Authors Love Readers podcast. Remember, you can always find out more about our guest authors in the show notes, and you can find out more about me at www.patriciamclinn.com. You can also send in questions to be asked of future authors at podcast@authorslovereaders.com. Until next week, wishing you lots of happy reading. Bye.